Good morning, everybody. We'll let everybody start shuffling in. Go ahead and orient yourself. There's a chat window. If you're not seeing that, you should be able to pull that up or it should be open. Do me a favor and let us know where you are logging in from while we wait for everybody. I'll just give it a couple more minutes. Good morning, guys. How are you? Alan, Jeff?
Great.
Good.
It's going to be
Awesome.
96 here today and humid. So
Holy cow.
this is May. Seems a little unusual.
I'm in beautiful Kansas, flat Kansas. It's cool today.
Texas cooled down yesterday. We were 50, 60 degrees and rainy. So
Wow.
We switched weathers, Jeff. We switched it.
Well, as I mentioned to you, I enjoy hearing weather forecasts from people in the center of the country because usually it's headed our way and I know what's going to be facing over the next few days.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to get started, guys. So good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this important discussion today. Many of you might have taken part in our compliance leadership forums earlier this year, which these two guys were a part of, and we're excited to have them here today to answer some questions. Now, we want to be stewards of your time because we know it's important. So without wasting a breath, let's get moving. So on the screen, you'll find our agenda. So if you can, get a quick idea of what today will look like. We'll do some quick intros, get into some news and top of mind questions that have come in ahead of time, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. Now, keep in mind, Q&A is open the whole time. So if you have any questions, you can use the question feature right there. And if we have time later, we'll hit a speed round with a few speedy answers to some of the industry's biggest questions. And then we'll walk away with action and get on with our day. So before we get too far, let me introduce myself. My name is James Cross, and I'll be doing my best to keep this group on track today. When we have this much experience and passion in one room, you can lose track of time. So it's my job to keep us honest. And a little bit about me before we get started. First off, I'm a father and a husband. As you can see, my family on a recent trip to Atlanta. Very thankful for my family and definitely the reason I do what I do. Secondly, I'm the Chief Experience Officer here at EWN, and it's my job to ensure the industry experiences EWN the same every single time. No matter if you're a client, a future client, a vendor, partner, or a regulator, I make sure we are who we say we are. And you might also know me from my work on our podcast, Coffee with Jim and James. Over the past 6 years, myself and Jimmy Shower had quite the ride. And I know a lot of you were on board for that ride, and I appreciate you for that. Now, if I had to say what drives me, obviously my family, which I've noted already, but also I'm a big traveler. I love getting out there and seeing the world, and I'm a sucker for a good taco, no matter where I am. I'm a simple man. And finally, today, I'm your host. When I look at the pedigree of these two gentlemen that are joining us today, I realize I'm here for comic relief at best, and I'm okay with that. That's enough about me. Let's talk about today's discussion and the why behind it. So what's the goal today? This discussion is built to be a peer-to-peer conversation and a place for collaboration, much like our compliance leadership forums, which include a larger group of experts. These events intend to bring smart minds together and discuss the big challenges and opportunities in front of us as an industry. It's not a place for judgment. Questions are anonymous, and we intend to honor that. So save the judgment for another day. And if you haven't figured it out yet, we've brought together a couple of former federal regulators to paint perspective into today's conversation, something we hope to provide clarity no matter your challenges. And we are live today, virtual, online, and the truth is there's no way to answer every question today if we try. I know these guys, and if you ask them what time it is, they'll tell you how to build a watch. Also, I've seen the list of questions that have already been submitted. And again, there's no way we'll finish everything today, but that's okay. This conversation will continue in many forms via email, newsletters, and more live events like today. This conversation doesn't stop here, so please ask away, even if we don't have time to get to that answer today. And we'll make sure to save space for things that are relevant and topical because it's important work that we do, and we want to stay relevant and timely with our conversations. And this place is about sharing knowledge and the lessons learned. So as we say all the time, the answer's in the room. If you have your own answers or comments, please share them in the chat. It's the only way we all get better. And lastly, use that chat. Use the Q&A. Use the reactions. Let us know how we're doing, as long as it's good. I think my boss might be in here. Let's get into it. Meet today's guests. These two guys, I can safely say, are my friends. Alan, Jeff, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm glad you two can make it. I have a slide up with the full regulatory advisory group, including you two, but also Kevin Spicer and Steve Allen, both good friends of all of ours. If you attend our other events, you'll see these four together, and it's really a treat, to say the least. Before we get going, I want to introduce these two. Actually, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Jeff Wiese, do me a favor and introduce yourself first.
Okay, sure. I was the former head of the Office of Pipeline Safety within PHMSA. That was my most relevant experience. Did that for about 10 years. About 6 or 7 years afterwards, I was senior VP in an engineering firm called TRC that's out there. Good company. Prior to all that, I spent 15 years with what used to be known as the Minerals Management Service. Common thread amongst all those things, and we'll be getting into talking about it later, is safety management systems, both in the offshore and onshore and pipelines.
We go next, James.
Yeah, sorry. Appreciate you, Jeff. I didn't know how long you were going to go, man. Usually it's like half an hour.
Usually it's long-winded. Yeah.
He really is.
What's wrong with you, Jeff?
You okay? You feeling okay? Alan, do us a favor. Go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm Alan Mayberry, former associate administrator, same position Jeff had at PHMSA's Office of Pipeline Safety. Did that for about 9 years, 10 years, and retired late last year in September. I'm currently the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Jana. They're a software company that advises clients on probabilistic risk models. And I'm also on the board of directors of Skipper NDT and Young Pipeline Professionals, which is probably one of the more rewarding experiences, dealing with the young professionals out there and mentoring them. By the way, Chad mentioned that we're former regulators, and what that means is, you can tell us anything now. You don't have to hold back. You can ask anything. You don't have to hold back. So just keep that in mind.
That's scary.
Anyway.
Yeah, we might go all day today. You're saying that. Sometimes we see you two as just like this enigma, right? In the past, like just somebody that was there that we only saw in that regulator role. I think it's important, Jeff, in our first CLF, I asked you, what do you do for fun? So what do you do for fun, man?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, a little bit of golf. Still have kids and a grandkid, a fairly new grandkid, which is so much fun. I'm trying to do as much working out as possible. I think one of the things what Alan and I can share with people oftentimes, and we invite people to ask pointed questions, is about the why things are the way they are. Sometimes you have to sit inside the machine and look at all of its parts, only some of which you can control, before you understand how things come out looking like they did. And it's often not the way that you intended, right? There's just too many hands in our chefs in the kitchen. And so Yeah, that's mostly it. I think I like traveling as well, James. Seeing
Yeah.
places, going, doing.
Last time we talked, you were a chef. I thought
I
you were about to transition into it.
Yeah, no, not professionally, but I think my family will keep me busy. They like to eat, and they like the way Dad cooks for them. So yeah, no, I enjoy that a lot. I used to
Al,
be a lot more into music, which I think you are too, James. I've
I
still got
do.
my whole collection of guitars and my shotguns. I still have multiple shotguns out here, so
Love it.
don't get an opportunity to hunt out here though. I have to go to Alan's house to do any hunting.
Alan. Alan, how about you, sir?
Yeah, I love the outdoors. I love fly fishing up in Shenandoah. We live near Shenandoah National Park, so that's kind of the outlet to go to. But so I love that. But it seems like I spend a lot of my time, my free time, just working on our property, clearing wood, splitting wood, getting rid of, when there's a big storm. Seems like there's always work to do on the 25 acres we have, and right up against the Blue Ridge Mountains there in Virginia. So love
Gorgeous.
them.
Gorgeous. Awesome. See, they're just regular guys just hanging out today. Just can't wait to get out and chop some wood. Well, thank you both
Yeah.
for those intros. Let's get into today's conversation. So I wanted to start about 3 weeks ago, all three of us, but also two of our colleagues, Steve and Kevin, all were together at AGA, the big event there in Tampa. And then also, you two were at API leading up to that as well. I was just wondering, from y'all's two perspectives, were there any big takeaways from either one of those events? Those are big industry events that happened in the same week. Was there anything that just jumped out to y'all that this group might need to know?
Yeah, let's start with one in the decade of demand. I think was a theme that was prominently portrayed at API, and then permitting reform were two major issues. Another one was public engagement, focusing on that, but in particular the decade of demand and the um, expectation and the actual reality. If you look at the AIA statistics on their website, of increasing demand for energy in the U.S., in particular natural gas, of course, other products as well.
I think what I would add is that I love going to these because I get to see people I don't get to see very often, see them face to face, spend time talking to them. Alan and I were both on an executive roundtable before the API meeting, and I would say, and welcome Alan's comments on that, that I was really pleased that API invited labor representatives to come there too. They ask us, I think, as much because Dave Merck, who runs pipelines in API, is our friend and we all used to work together, and he's looking for an excuse to get us out there. But I found all the comments that Alan just gave came out a lot in that executive roundtable. The other thing I would say about AGA was that I think even they said, hey, we'd like to see you guys do this again, but we need to give it more time because we definitely ran out of time on that one. And I think there were a lot of questions that people wanted to ask.
Yeah,
Things you gotta say.
for
Yeah.
those that were not in attendance at AGA that are joining us today, we did a live compliance leadership forum with all four of the regulatory advisory group members. And all we had was about 50 minutes. And then I think we did another 50 minutes after answering questions that didn't have time, right? So it
No,
was good. And then it just kept going, right? The conversations kept going. It's the type of atmosphere we wanted to create. So it was great. It was great being shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow with you guys as well. I know we got to sit down and have y'all on the podcast as well. So looking forward to that coming out. So any other takeaways that you want to bring up with this group? Or
you could ask us which one was our favorite, API or AGA.
I mean, you already did, Alan. So you're interviewing yourself. Yeah, which one was y'all's favorite?
Yeah, no, they were both awesome. I mean, I always enjoy the API crowd and AGA. My roots are as an LDC operator years ago, but love catching up with API. They had some amazing topics that cover natural gas and liquid pipelines. Don't just think of it as, if you think it's not just liquids, it's natural gas and liquids, and topics related, panels, discussions from everything related to the Carl Weimer from the Pipeline Safety Trust to,
Nice.
public engagement. So it was good. Just like AGA was great too.
Yeah, I was at AGA all week, so I wasn't at API, but AGA was fantastic. I mean, if you've never been to one of those events, I know y'all kind of halved it between the two, but being there all week from the community service all the way through I think they had a capstone party as well at the end. I heard just, great reviews all the way through.
One last thing on that, if I can, because I heard it in both meetings, was that the current focus on, as we all know, data centers is like a huge focus everywhere you go. But hey, kudos to the pipeline industry, because it appears to me the pipeline industry, while they've got a lot of room to work with on 1185, doing public engagement, not just public mailers, but public engagement. Man, the data centers are behind pipelines, that's for sure. Yeah. And so there was a lot of grousing in these meetings about all the data centers and all the complaints that are coming in about that. Pipelines have a huge role to play in that stuff. So kudos to the pipeline people for that.
Yeah, for sure. So much for bridge fuel, right? Unless that bridge is on its way to a data center. Well, I am going to jump right into questions right now because we have a backlog. Good news is we had a lot of folks submit. So I'm going to start with those. And so we'll start with the first one. I'm going to read it, but I believe they'll share it on the screen as well. And you guys can fight over who goes first. Where did the push for operators to approve contractor OQ plans come from? And how can operators realistically keep up with reviewing them all?
Alan?
I'm not so much, this approval. Really, owners have always, owners have always had responsibility related to compliance with the regulations. So if you're using a contractor, you need to ensure that your contractor is under a valid OQ plan, whether that's your own or one that you're reviewing that they have that satisfies the requirements. One, requirements of being qualified, but two, requirements of the code. But it's always been the expectation. So I'm not sure of so much of a new push to approve, if you will, but the expectation from at least when. From PHMSA's standpoint, from my perspective, having been there, was that, we look to the operator to ensure they're using qualified contractors and, and meeting the requirements of the code. So, Jeff?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, I think the state look at it the same way too. The operator is the one who's responsible, right? You can choose to use contractors if you wish. If you do, you need to manage that. You need to make sure they live up to your expectations. I think we'll come back to that as we talk about SMS down the road here a little bit. But, you've seen DCA, the distribution contractors, have come out with kind of a format, they think for SMS for the contractors. And I think reasonable contractors will follow that, right? Because that'll be a base for them to have a discussion with the operator who is also doing SMS. A lot of the, appreciate the fact that a lot of the transmission people are already along the way. It's the smaller distribution firms are a little slow to take it up, but I think we'll come back and talk about this. But the last thing on that is we'll get around to it, but I think it's the difference between certification and qualification. This is crucial. It was talked about at API and the executive roundtable and all of the apprentice programs that labor is putting in place to make sure people are qualified. And so I don't want to go too long on it, but I think it is the operator's responsibility, if they choose to use contractors, to make sure that they are qualified to do their work for them.
Yeah, I mean, it is called operator qualifications at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's simple as that. All right, Question number 2. And if anybody has kind of their own input on how you're managing it or or not managing it for that reason, drop it in the chat and we can talk about it more. And if you have questions in the moment, feel free to just throw them in there. If they, extend on something or you want us to dive deeper, we'll keep going. All right. Number 2, what are the best ways operators can demonstrate span of control?
I'd say for starters, not to be cliche, but empower employees. And let me tell you what I mean by that. And that's, related to the ability to, shut down a pipeline if you're a control room operator. And speaking of that, specifically related to span of control, I know during my time more recently at PHMSA, and it continues to be a concern over the contracting out of control rooms that have contributed to the severity of accidents that, related to the challenges of one having a contractor that may have multiple control rooms they're running at one time. That's probably, unfortunately, as a regulator, a lot of examples of where, that weren't the best. But then where the owner has, direct control and direct engagement is better. Just if the contracting out has been an issue with control rooms. Similarly, over the years and, going way back related to just construction in general, to use that as an example of just contracting the function, but having more of an arm's length, not being directly involved. I think that, I've seen issues with that, but they're good examples of where an operator just has direct owner involvement in construction and, on a daily basis and not totally contracting every function from, obviously you do the construction of the pipeline, but also the inspection, but you need that ownership engagement.
Yeah. And I would say that construction, that's where I was going to go myself, because we have in our history seen a lot of examples of when there's a surge in construction like there is now, what happens is quality suffered, and that leads to later regrets, right? So do it right, put it in the ground right, and I think you got a better chance of running a relatively safe operation. If it's not done right at that point, it's sure to manifest itself later. But Alan and I could both cite a million examples. I won't use names here probably, but there was a company that was running a long distance pipeline, and they just clearly were not staffing it well. And they had too aggressive a schedule for the crews that they provided. So I think this is a classic example where they set milestones that are unrealistic milestones, unachievable with the resources that have been given to the field crews to do the work. And people start cutting corners because they're incentivized and hit all their targets. So I think we've all seen that, and we can recognize that during a surge in construction nationally, you really want to pay double down on your quality control and assessment. So anyway, sorry.
And part of the issue there is just being aware as the operator of issues that, if you've contracted a service that, you want to stay on top and not let things get out of hand. So you need to have that level of involvement that you're aware, because there have been issues where, say, welding issues manifest just kept continuing, or issues related to other issues like on the construction, say coding issues, but you want to nip those in the bud so they don't keep going.
Yeah, the one we're not going to use names of, but we can always say we had a friend who had a pipeline that the regulators required them to dig up like 100 welds. They came back and found out that one particular welder was really sloppy in his work. Fortunately, they had all of the radiography they needed. They were able to go back in and figure out which welds that person had done. They had the data behind it, and they were able to go in, and a lot of those welds were bad. That was just latent issues waiting to happen there. So there is by the way, it's just an interesting thing I'll throw on the table. there's a discussion going on. Some of you are familiar with PODS, the Pipeline Open Data Standard. There's a discussion going on about building a module for pods that would go to the contractors and say, hey, on our job, these are the data elements we need from you. Just deliver it as part of the overall job, which I think is brilliant. You know, you've got to have that data. It's got to be traceable and verifiable. So why not?
Shout out to Monique over at Pods, good
Yeah.
friend of ours.
Yeah, mine did.
Who's that?
I've heard of her.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 3. We're going to move right along. We've briefly mentioned new PHMSA leadership. So with that new leadership, what should operators be focused on right now?
Alan, maybe I'll start on this one and spare you on that. But Alan and I were talking about this general issue yesterday, and I think I speak for Alan when I say that most operators are pretty smart. You know, honestly, some of the smartest people I've ever known were in various companies, and they're smart enough to play the long game. By that I mean, don't be swayed by a short game, because we live in a world that's kind of like a pendulum. It swings from side to side. Play the long game, and I think you'll have to make fewer changes down the road. Other than that, I mean, I would say we understand, and it's kind of a rumor that we think is verifiable, that the new head of the Office of Pipeline Safety, Alan's and my successor, will be named in the coming weeks. And so they've gone through a search for that, and they'll have somebody doing the work, God bless them, that Alan and I used to do. We were joking this morning, let's make sure their blood pressure pills are lined up, so they may need that one. But I don't know, the political leadership, I've worked for Dems and Republicans my whole career. And a lot of times I can't tell the difference between them. You know, if it's mission driven, there's not much of a difference between them. There are some stylistic differences. But I think the best advice that Alan and I have both given people in the industry is talk to your regulator. I mean, you don't have to go to headquarters in DC. I mean, for God's sakes, they're probably send your execs if they happen to be in town or in for a visit if you want, if you see a purpose in that. But the regional folks are really, they welcome you, knock on their door and going, hey, we just like to talk over our plans here, make sure we understand what your drivers are and what you're interested in. And there's no particular objective other than saying, hey, this is what we're doing. What are your thoughts on that? I think you'll find them more than receptive to that kind of conversation.
You know, I would just add, related to the new leadership, we've seen a change. You've probably seen a change in maybe the way enforcement's done. I mean, it's obvious. In fact, I was just looking earlier today on the enforcement statistics on the enforcement transparency website. Yes, okay, when you have a new administration, in this particular case, enforcement did go down, but I think the focus is really more impactful enforcement. And I will tell you, I signed off on a lot of final orders that involve atmospheric corrosion or missed deadline. A lot of things that were fairly routine. And yeah, okay, it's important to get that stuff done, but why are pipelines failing? They're failing because we're missing things in how we manage risk. And, those are more impactful types of areas to look. So I think you'll find, a change in that. And frankly, I welcome that. That's important. Value added areas, not to forget about the other stuff, but the more impactful. And I think you'll see, some of the enforcement actions I've seen come out more recently have been pretty heavy hitting on, for significant issues. So I think you'll see that. You'll see a bit of backing off of the relatively minor stuff. That's just kind of my 2 cents on that.
Jeff, you can really tell how long Alan's been away from PHMSA and how long you have.
And by the way, I've mentioned this before, James, but and everyone is, a number of things have come out related to, there's the 45-day notice, just call it that, related to if you need to vary from the code situations. I think there's a certain level of flexibility and a desire to use innovation to drive pipeline safety. And so I would use the time with the current administration, to seek opportunities to get better using innovation, using new techniques, looking, the special permit process is being revised, just looking for opportunity to leverage technology to improve pipeline safety. I think FEMS has made it clear that they're interested in that. So that's some advice.
Yes, we do have a question that came in the chat. And if you need some more context, feel free to reframe it. But can you provide some insight when it comes to control room management?
Well, okay, sure. First off, if you look at the incident data across the United States, control room management related accidents they're not that many. However, they're very impactful. If you look at the severity of an accident, decisions made in the control room are critical to reducing the impact of failure. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Like I mentioned earlier, and this is just observations from my time in dealing with the issue at PHMSA, is contracted control rooms have been an area of concern. And it's not that you shouldn't do that. I mean, it makes sense in cases, but you just need to make sure you have the contract provisions in place, the expectations in place, the knowledge, the involvement in place that the right thing is done, and your pipeline that's being, using a contract control room is, being properly monitored.
I think the only thing I'm going to add on that one is some of the Hall of Fame accidents that we've witnessed during our time on there, whether it was Bellingham, whether it was Marshall, Michigan. The big ones really did have a control room focus on some of the issues, particularly Marshall, Michigan, but missing things or misreading signals that they're getting. And those were just really, as Alan was saying, they're very impactful incidents. Both of us spent a lot of time in all of those, San Bruno, you name it, Allentown, all of those things. So, yeah, I would just say that too. And the lessons were learned. And I think, there have been team training requirements that have gone in. There have been fatigue management issues that have gone into control rooms. But it's one of those areas where things just work well 95% of the time, and people get lulled into a sense of complacency, and I got to find a way to stay focused, right? So, and manage all the alarms you're getting, most of which are really false alarms. So,
and I would add, I mean,
that one on the fly. Oh, go ahead, Alan.
No, I was just going to say, I've been to control rooms across the U.S. from Anchorage, Alaska, the North Slope, what was up there, to Houston and Atlanta, Alpharetta, Georgia. And must say I'm very impressed with what I've seen, overall, just in general.
Awesome. All right, moving on. Next question. What is y'all's perspective on remote evaluations?
Well, I think Alan and I did talk about this when we saw the question before, and I would say, it's interesting for some aspects of an inspection, but I think very challenging to do, for most of the things you need to do there. First of all, you're talking with people all over the company. You're out in the field and field locations, just challenging to do it all I'd love to find ways to make the inspection more efficient, but a lot of stuff happens live during an inspection. Say, oh, okay, great. Can we see that? Somebody says something. And I just think in the logistics of doing it, if we're all remote, it's challenging. It's interesting idea, and maybe some components of it could be done. The setting up of things, the saying these are the things we'd like to see and talk to. Better planning maybe. But I don't know, Alan.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's done already, as you probably well know, say for an integrated inspection, for starters, there's a screening week, and that's done remotely often, typically. And that kind of helps target where the inspection will go. But maybe there's opportunity to be more efficient with some of the records, the questions that come up related to that. I mean, I've been on the inspections before just to immerse myself in it, and recognize the operator has to get together all the right SMEs, and it's a scheduling nightmare. It can be, especially for the time duration involved. But maybe there's opportunity related to some of the record stuff, like I said. Now, having said all that, I've been on the Hill, and I know Jeff has too, talking to, oversight committees for pipeline safety. And I can tell you there's an expectation that PHMSA has boots on the ground and in a very robust way. So that's not going to go away. Will inspections become remote? I doubt it. Can they be more efficient? And maybe some lend themselves to remote, possibly, but there'll always be that expectation. There's a pressure, I can tell you, and always that PHMSA is out there, and certainly the trade associations that represent you, also, and you yourselves, you want a strong regulator, and part of that involves a presence out there in the field. But anyway.
Yeah, and your regulator, I tell you this, we can both tell you this, gets blamed every time there's an industry failure. They do. I mean, under an expectation that the regulator's there to stop these things. This one happened, therefore it's a failure on the regulator. Let's go ahead and pass part of the law that every 4 years to reauthorize that program and tell them a bunch of more things we think they need to do. Someday, that's really, if you're ever interested, that's where Ellen and I can really shine a lot of light into. That's like a rabbit hole. You go down in that thing, and trying to figure out how you get out of it is probably worthwhile. But
that's the next episode with Alan and Jeff,
yeah,
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to come back around. We got one more that kind of came off the cuff regarding control room management. Are y'all aware of any new regs regarding control room management or regulations that could affect overall compliance, like the new valve rule or anything like that?
Well, I mean, that's a very loaded question. I mean, there's a very robust regulatory agenda right now. And as you may know, there was an executive order soon after Trump was inaugurated called the 10 for 1 provision, which means for every regulation you issue, you must, remove 10 burdensome ones. Now, the math on it to me is a bit fuzzy, but, there's certain things that actually count in your favor, like lessening burdens can actually count in the dereg category. But suffice it to say, the idle pipeline rule, which is not probably the highest priority, Alan's opinion right now, but it's a high priority. It's also, there's a mandate associated with it from Congress. Distribution rule, which is, there's an advisory committee meeting next week on that. LNG rule is probably the most antiquated rule ever. I would say probably not ever, but it's the most antiquated rule at PHMSA. That one's got a high priority, and you can bet that'll be coming soon. In addition, and I know many of you are concerned about this, they're involved in asset integrity, is repair criteria. I can tell you that is a high priority from what I've seen from PHMSA. So I would expect to see some traction on that, in the coming months. So, stay tuned.
James, if you'll allow a little digression here, I know that it's controversial. seemingly when I say this, but PHMSA does a lot of PHMSA. I always use Office of Pipeline Safety. It does a lot more than just write regulations and enforce those regulations. And most of the regulations, by the way, come by way of congressional mandates following an accident. PHMSA does do some of its own because of things they've learned in these events. But the thing that I think is controversial when I say that I don't think compliance should be our objective. And we'll get back to that talking about SMS, but compliance is probably not going to get us to our goal. It's sufficient. We know that a lot of people do good work. I'm not trying to denigrate anyone's work. I'm just saying that because of the regulatory battle, the regulator never really gets a safety standard that they would want. They get something that they've negotiated. And we'll see, because PHMSA has reorganized its advisory committees too. And I think to their detriment. They've kicked off like the Pipeline Safety Trust, which was always hey, they're players. They're testifying on Capitol Hill. It's good to have the players in the room so you can air out all these issues. So we'll see how this goes, but I would urge people, the compliance is important, and we're not trying to say it's not, but I would say it does not achieve safety just by complying with rules that are, like Alan said, some of them are grossly out of date. And the mechanism, remember, they ask us every year, they'll come back to the agency, the Office Management Budget goes, hey, you guys collect so many hours of information. We just want you to reduce it 10% this year. And you go, does it matter what kind we reduce? And no, just reduce it 10%. So we remember one year we gave up hydro test failure location. Like, why did you do that? I mean, I would want to know if particular systems were having frequent failures in hydro tests there, something to keep an eye on. But these are things that the Office of Pipeline Safety is just not in total control of what happens there.
Yeah, I think you made that point live in Tampa about, or one of you two did about it. Let's not forget this is a negotiated result sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not always this thing first or one thing over the other. It's a negotiation to get it across the line, and I think we forget that sometimes.
Yeah, and by the way, the question I think started with control room, and I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anything specific to control room. It might be some ancillary update, but as far as I know, there's not there's not a rulemaking in play right now dedicated to control room, from what I've seen. But you can look on the PHMSA website too for that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. And for those that are sitting on questions, go ahead and submit them. That way we have them ready when we get through these last couple. So real quick, for multi-state operators, what's the best way to handle differing state regulatory opinions? And I know we have some former state regulators on staff as well. We consulted before that, but any insight for that?
Well, this is an issue that commonly comes up with LDCs. It also has come up with midstream operators, interstate operators, believe it or not. But I would say first, talk with your state, talk with the states, engage with them first, and just see if you can work through the difference. I think you can communicate with PHMSA. In fact, I think it's always good to engage with your regulator, including PHMSA, if there's an issue you can't resolve. But I would first go to the source, to talk with them first, and realize too that the states can vary from the federal code. If in many cases they do have additional requirements. There is a provision in statute that says that they have to be consistent with pipeline safety. So, but typically they are. If you go to the NAPSR website, napsr.org, they have a compendium, and you can see where the states vary from the federal code.
Just a little bit of history to shed a little more light on that. At one point in time in history, the pipelines were all regulated by the states, right? it was only through a series of accidents that Congress got involved, as though they can fix anything. They got involved and said, hey, interstate commerce applies here, so we're going to create an agency who's going to rely on a lot of industry standards to build its regulatory program. It still does, right? But on intrastate matters, they really direct PHMSA to defer to the states on intrastate. Now, PHMSA does a lot of stuff. They train all the state inspectors as best they can, but as Alan's saying, they all have their own little flavor, and it's challenging at a PHMSA and OPS level to have 50 some state partners. In some states have gas partner and a liquid partner. So it is quite challenging, but NAPSR has gotten better over the years, I think, about trying to develop more unified views. Yeah, it's a challenge for everyone, but the states have a right on intra-state issues. So it's just hard to beat that.
Yeah,
Another.
Alan, let me just clear something up for folks that maybe don't know all the acronyms, right? National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives. So
yes,
it's going to be your,
thank you.
State program managers, things like that. Yep. Go ahead. And we dropped some links in the chat.
No, I was just going to say another area, and I was dealing with this during my time at PHMSA, and I know Jeff did as well. But we, seen over the last several years where states who were previously really encouraging replacement of legacy infrastructure are slowing that down, and that's to me an issue that's got to be resolved at some point. It's only a handful of states, but there is a need to replace, 18, there's currently cast iron pipe installed in 1865, from my understanding, in Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. At some point, something's got to give. That's got to come out of the ground. There's a lot of infrastructure out there, and I can appreciate the affordability issue, which is really the competing interest, but we've got to focus, have the safety focus to address legacy infrastructure in the, typically it's in the local distribution company areas.
Yeah, there's two quick points on that, if I can,
Sure.
Alan. And again, we've talked about this issue before and done some consulting for companies, and they've said, hey, here's our dilemma. We know where our riskiest pipe is. We want to replace it. We can't get approvals to do that. And in that particular case, I've advised people, I said, well, I was always taught that we should hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So I'd sure as hell document the fact and send a letter to them saying, hey, we've advised you that we need to replace this infrastructure. And in a distribution setting, they're looking for ability to recover costs, and they're not given that. I'd sure as hell want to have that piece of paper if something bad happened on that pipe and say, we were trying, right? Yeah. The other thing I saw when commissions got challenging in the states was to a friend of Alan's and mine, actually, who was running a distribution company, risk ranked all the risks that they thought they were facing and went into the commission and publicly and said, this is where we think we can draw the line rationally and make it more affordable for people. But if you want to draw it in a different location, commission, you tell us where to draw that line. Another example, I think, of putting them on the hook that said they know the risks are there. If they're not prepared to help you address it, then make sure that you have documentation on that one.
Love it. All right. We're going to keep moving. We got just a couple more. We wouldn't do our job if we weren't talking about data centers, right? So how should operators prepare for, or I know some of them are in the middle of it, for the speed and disruption driven by data centers right now, while still maintaining compliance and safety throughout?
Well, it certainly came up at the API conference we attended, and there's a lot of discussion in AAGA as well. And it seems like pipeline operators who may supply the fuel are getting caught in the crossfire, and there are concerns over, I think, Jeff, you had mentioned this, public engagement. it seems like a lot of the developers aren't as advanced as, say, pipeline operators have been. And, with the requirements that we have, the minimum requirements we have for public awareness and engagement. So I would say that a need to focus on public engagement is imperative, but then also the expected construction boom that comes out of it. Jeff and I were a part of the last construction boom as regulators, and it got pretty ugly. So it employee to focus on construction quality, oversight of the work that you're paying good money to get done to connect these data centers at a minimum, or any customer for that matter. But focus on quality, and we could have another whole session on the related to construction, because there are some really good lessons learned, and we don't want to repeat the history.
Yeah. And I think the underlying that is just, I hate to use this phrase, but it's true. Speed kills, there is a rush going on. We see it. We live in Data Farm Central. I mean, Ashburn, Virginia, just look at the satellite maps out there. There's so many data
That's where the
farms.
backbone
New ones
comes
going
in.
up constantly.
Yeah.
But they're moving into Prince William County and everywhere across the country. Somebody showed a map at the API meeting where they had plotted all of the data farms that are proposed as well as existing. It was pretty stunning. But just to underscore one point Alan made already is that, there's a huge difference between awareness and engagement. And I think that gets messed on a lot of even pipeline operators. They're mailing out a bunch of stuff that people throw on the mail as soon as they get it, and it doesn't do any good at all. So finding more meaningful ways of engaging with people is well worth talking about.
Love that topic. It's probably going to be a topic we talk about for a bit. I'm going to skip our last question and jump into the speed round. Again, if anybody has questions, please drop them in and we'll get them answered or do our best to. So, Alan, I'm going to start with you. What's the biggest gap operators are leaving in their programs?
Word to the wise, related to security. During my time at PHMSA, it's one of those threats that's out there lurking that is hidden. But and many of you, perhaps, if you're involved in certain parts of your organization on asset integrity or public engagement, you may not deal with this part of your company, but security is an area that just waiting. We're just waiting for something to happen at some point. There's already an infiltration of SCADA systems by foreign actors, nation state actors. It's been publicized, and it's just waiting they're waiting to flip the switch, basically. And just so the word to the wise here is this: be able to operate your system, regardless of the status of your SCADA system. We saw issues when the Colonial failure happened related to the ability to run manually. You've got to have a backup plan. So, I would flex those plans. And, the resolution to the cyber issue, the infiltration, if you will, is very daunting. So the best, really preparation right now, do what you can do right now, which is be prepared for it and be able to run your pipeline. That's it.
James, can I throw something in on that one?
Always.
Sorry. I'm a huge advocate of a greater focus on culture in organizations. Engaging people on your front line. I mean, engaging them. It's not going out and giving speeches and then leaving. It's listening too, besides talking. But the culture and building a speak up culture where people feel a little empowered, out in the field, they're your front line. They see things on a daily basis. And if you invite them to, they will help you discover risks that you might not be focused on and try to address those before they manifest themselves in some negative way. But honestly, it's the culture thing I think is just people give it lip service, and they'll do some sort of a poll through email or something like that, just a quick poll, and then grade themselves on it. But I think it takes a lot more than that. It does take discussions. And honestly, I do assessments on SMS right now. And I can generally tell when I go into a company pretty damn quickly what kind of a culture they have. If you go into a CEO's meeting and all the senior staff are there, but none of them are really talking besides the CEO, already a negative sign as far as I can tell. You hear a lot of stuff, then you go out to the field, which is essential to field test this stuff. And then those people have never heard about what you're talking about. You go, how's it going to have any effect? If the people in the field don't know anything about it. So really engage people and focus on culture, not just little surveys, because oftentimes they just give you something to think about. I don't think you should ignore them, but it's not an action-based little survey like that. So
awesome. Alan, I don't think that's ever happened before, but Jeff answered your speed round question. So I don't know how to discount points for that. I don't know what happened. So
I would take points away. Yeah.
You're winning currently for sure. Jeff, speed round again, I guess. Why is SMS so important to the pipeline industry?
If I could take that one on. No.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Okay, you already lost points on that. Well, no, I think Alan and I would probably tell you much of the same thing, is that I've kind of pointed to it a couple of times in my remarks already, is like I just don't think we can achieve what we want to achieve by just setting a compliance mentality. We have to understand our risk better. We have to adopt a learning culture, that prizes learning from events. There's change going on all the time around us. So, I just say that our goal is to make sure everybody goes home safe at the end of the day, and that we don't damage our neighbors and landowners and the environment around us. To achieve our goals, and just to focus on compliance is not going to get us there. And even though you will hear some people say, well, we think it's silly that you're focusing on zero as a goal. And I'll say, name your goal then. What do you want to go? Pipelines, better, like it or not. It's a very political subject because it connects things. And the advocates have figured out if we can stop a pipeline, we might be able to damage or stop something else. So I did say the API and a lot of the executives there, it's like, okay, do you want to take 10? Is 10 fatalities going to be a good goal for you this year? It's like, I'd sure as hell not be the one who wants to go out in public and go, hey, we're only hitting 10 this year. And normally there's ballpark 15 fatalities or so a year, and maybe 50 serious injuries a year, untold property damage. So once you see the data that's on there and say, we all have work to do, I don't think compliance is important. I'm not trying to underestimate it. I'm just saying that it takes more than that. And I think SMS is one of the paths to get there. So if you're not familiar with what your company's doing, engage in the SMS journey.
I was on a panel on PSMS at AGA, and this question kind of the question came up of like, what's the strongest indicator of culture, strong safety culture. And I brought up, we all focus on zero, right? Like we want zero incident accidents, but, I like to see high reportable near misses, right? Like I like to see that in my report to know that the culture is strong as well. So, all right, guys, that is it. We have exhausted our time today. I know, just like that. We just started, but I want to wrap up so everybody can get some info. So we are going to throw up a slide real quick. Here it is. First of all, I want to thank everybody for attending today. It was great, exactly what we hoped for. We did record this, and a link will be sent out to everybody. So if you want to share it with anybody else, we're happy if you do that. These conversations will continue, just like we said. So expect emails on some of the topics and some of the questions we didn't get to. The next webinar that is coming up is in July. We're actually going to have a full compliance leadership forum for anybody that might be interested. You can scan that QR on the screen. That way you don't miss anything. And lastly, if you're on LinkedIn, come find us. Look for EWN. We'll be sharing the highlights from this discussion as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining us, Alan, Jeff. It's been a great conversation. Always a pleasure to be around you.
Love it. Yeah.
Hey, until next time, be safe. Keep doing the good work out there.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming.
See you guys.